latest edition of Wigment Interviews. Today, we are delighted to host Mr. Pankaj Chadda, Chairman of Engineering Export Promotion Council of India. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure talking to you.
To begin, I would like to ask you, sir, to provide a brief overview of India's engineering export sector.
Okay. Well, we did $109 billion last year. The target set by the Commerce Ministry is 118, but we have set on ourselves the target of 125. Currently, we are, I think, we are past 118. I think we should cross. We're trying that we should get to 125. We constitute about 28.4% of India's export. So hopefully, if we do at the same pace at where we are, we would be between 28 and 30% of India's export. Now, when you dive deep into the engineering sector, what is it that is actually the item that is really we are selling? One of the biggest items, I think, would be iron and steel, which is about 17% of the export share. Then we have industrial machinery, which is about 17.5%. We have electrical machinery, which is about 12.5%. We have auto and auto components, which is about 20 to 21%. And then we have other industrial machinery, which is about 12%. So if you look at it from this point of view, I would say these 5 items constitutes more than 80% of engineering exports. And yeah, as I said, I'm sure it's known fact, 60% of our members is from MSME and 50% of our exports is from the MSME sector. So I would say MSMEs are it's the backbone of engineering exports, and we definitely represent the interest not only of the large makers but also of the MSME makers.
Steel imports from China to India has increased by 45% in the past 6 months to 1.61 million ton. How does this impact India's export competitiveness? Can you comment on that?
Yeah. Now, see, I agree. The figure has gone up 45%, like vis-a-vis the Japanese figure going up 130%, right? The question is, these figures have gone up, but we need to look into the detailing of this figure also. What exactly has gone up? Because what happens is a lot of times, Japanese are exporting raw material. I mean, raw material means slabs, other small, you may call it semis, which are being used by our own industries, secondary industries to manufacture steel. So I would say from the point of view, whether it's the Chinese factor which is actually troubling us, I'm not too sure unless we go into a granular, exact working of what are the HS codes which is coming out of China and where are they going to also, because it's possible that, I don't have any Chinese automaker here. I don't have any Chinese white goods maker here. I have a Chinese phone maker, but that doesn't use steel. So the factor is that we'll have to do a granular analysis to understand what is coming from China and who's importing it, just to understand and give you a proper analysis. We know we did the Japanese analysis because that was an alarming 130%, and we find that most of it was for OE manufacturers, white goods makers and other things, and which was high value items and items which I presume were specific to the Japanese automakers and the white goods makers.
Recently, we came across this news that Steel Ministry has proposed the Commerce Ministry to impose a 25% safeguard duty on steel. How does this impact the cost efficiency of engineering exports, and what role EEPC can play to mitigate this impact?
Well, it's a huge challenge for us, especially for our MSME sector. We must realize that, as I said, MSME constitutes 50% of my exports, and they depend on raw material from domestic makers, because most of the MSMEs are so small that they cannot be importing themselves directly. So they are basically dependent on the domestic makers for their raw material, which constitutes 60% of their input cost. Steel is constituting close to 60% of the input cost. Now the question is, how is the price of domestic steel? It's based on, basically, we all know that it's based on what is the landed cost of steel. Let's say, for example, in HR, if the landed cost of steel is say 48 rupees, the domestic price will also be hovering around that figure only. It's not that the domestic price of steel can be at 58, because nobody will buy it, right? So the question is, if you were to impose a safeguard duty of 25%, you automatically increase the landed cost from 47 or 48 to 58. What happens? The domestic price automatically goes up. Gradually, you may call it, creeping wise, you may call it, but it does go up. So you suddenly have a situation that you have domestic price of 58 when it was 48 prior to the imposition of the safeguard duty. And that extra 20% is being borne by whom? By the MSME manufacturer. Can he compete in the international market? Markets are very challenging, very volatile. The geopolitical situation is extremely volatile. Geo-economic situation is very volatile. In such a circumstance, what we want is to support our MSME manufacturer, not burden them with a 20% hike in their basic raw material, which is 60% of their cost. So it will definitely affect them a hell of a lot. It's correct. See, we must first look at the principle behind it. If you have a specific item which is coming in a huge number at a price which is very, very cheap, right? Then we may use the anti-dumping route. Let's use the anti-dumping route. If a product is being dumped into India, yes, we must stop it. We must use the anti-dumping. Safeguard is a very, very rare measure. It's normally not used. It's only used in rarest of rare circumstances. I don't think this justifies a safeguard. Yes, if an item is coming in a big way under the cost, let's go for anti-dumping instead.
Sir, how much do you think, if this duty is imposed, how much steel prices will shoot up according to you?
10,000 rupees a ton.
Oh dear.
25%.
Yeah, if the safeguard duty of 25% is imposed,
10,000 rupees.
10,000 it will shoot up in the short term, right,
yes,
sir?
I mean, short term is 3 to 4 months.
How are surging FTA steel imports reaching 5.38 million ton in April to October in the first 7 months of current fiscal year impacting the cost structure of engineering exports? Are these cheaper imports competitive advantage or a potential risk for Indian exporters?
No, I don't think. See, that's why I said a lot of this Japanese imports are not coming in for engineering exporters. Yes, part of it is being used by engineering exporters, but a lot of it is being used by the Japanese automakers, white good makers, the Japanese OE manufacturers which are situated in India. A part of it would be used for engineering exporters. I'm also sure that quite a lot of this, some part of this is also being imported by the big steel plants, because they have tie-ups with Japanese steel mills. So I'm sure some part of that steel is also being utilized by the domestic steel makers also.
Port delays and regulatory hurdles inflate costs. What step can address these barriers for engineering exports?
Not the ships, basically it's Japanese material. It's not the ships, but I'll tell you what is the issue there. I think from what I could understand from the Japanese manufacturers, they are importing based on a yearly schedule. Let's say if you take a Japanese automaker, the order is placed yearly with delivery schedules every month, right? So every month he would have a specified delivery schedule for an order that is already placed for the whole year. They always have a yearly order system. Now imagine a Japanese automaker He's planned his production in that way. He also planned his raw material inward and in that same way. In January, he imported. I don't think they are importing 100% of their steel, but they are importing. I think the Siam told me they were importing only 15% of their requirement. Right? Basically, 15% of their requirement was being under the import section. Now, question is, in January he imports. Let's say if I would say his buying was 12,000 tons a year. So what would he split this buying up is 1,000 tons every month. Now, question is, in January he imports 1,000 tons. He applies for an NOC, he gets the NOC. In February he does it, he gets it. March he gets it. April he gets it. May he gets it. June he gets it. July he gets it. August he gets it. September onwards, the NOC committee that meets to give the NOC did not sit. So what happens in September? He has 1,000 tons that is coming, lying in the port, incurring demurrage, detention, costs, but no NOC because this committee has not met. Again, his 1,000 tons of October has also come. It's lying. 1,000 tons for November has also come. And 1,000 tons of December will also come. So what happens? He has planned based on some expectation, some past data, requirement, his past modus operandi, and suddenly from September onwards he has no NOC and his material is landing in ports and lying there and incurring detention, demurrage, other things.